So welcome back. I think we can carry on from where we left off last time. I think when we were looking at this class last time, we had discussed the issue of HTML anchor elements, and I think we also looked at how we could do things like um, navigation. We talked about lists, and also we talked about how we can be able to embed certain components like navigation, using links, using lists, and all that. So moving on today, I want us to start looking at forms. And forms are a way that we can be able to capture data as far as our inputs are concerned. I think I'll just open the folder which we were working on last time. So file recent. I don't know if it's this that I was using. Mm, had we started looking at forms with you guys? No, I don't think we started looking at forms. Yeah, so yeah, I think we only looked at a few elements, and let's start looking at forms today. So we had looked at a few things like navigation, where we said we navigate from one page to another. We created an aside. We also did paragraphs and lists, that is ordered list and unordered list, and anchor elements and images and things like that. So that's why we stopped us. So today I want us to discuss forms. So I'll create a new file here and I'll call it forms, not forms, but forms.html. Of course, as usual, I'm going to run this side by side so that you can be able to see how these work together. So I can have this on the right hand side, then I can have my code on the left hand side. I can collapse this editor so that now I have my code here and I have my output on the other side. So I'll initiate emmet and I'll say this is forms. Forms. So forms are a way that allows us to be able to capture data from our users, and forms come in different types of controls, which is what I want us to discuss today. So the first control I want us to discuss is the input control. Now the input control comes in multiple types to see, so I want us to start right from it. Now usually when we are putting forms, there are two ways that you can submit forms. So we have the HTML form element, and the form element has two methods. There is there's the post method and there's the get method. The get method, as you can see here, is the default. The post method is what you can say. So when you send an item as get, it means that the content of the forms are going to be sent as part of the URL. But when you send it as a post method, it means that the contents are not going to be sent as part of the URL, but rather they're going to be sent as a payload. Once we're done with the types of input, I'm going to demonstrate how that works out exactly. But when you put a form, the default method will always be get, as you can see over here. So this is how you work with forms. So you can enclose something inside forms, then now you can put all your inputs. Now a form will just be a form, as you can see over here. There's nothing that I'm viewing, in as much as if I come to the page source, you can see I have a form. I have a form, but actually there is nothing between it, and it does not display anything on the UI. So let's add a few elements on the form. So on this form, usually we put an input and a label side by side so that I'm able to demonstrate for you. This should be typed here. So let's say we're creating a form that a user is supposed to log in with. So I'll simply say, I'll put a label, and the label I'll say it's for maybe say username. Then I'll put here username, what should be displayed. So automatically you see username has appeared on my form. Then inside here, I'll put an input like that. So you can see there's an input here where I can be able to type my username. So I can say something like that. So this is an example of a label. This is an example of an input. So a label defines what needs to be put, what describes rather what the input field is all about. And as you can see, the default for input is type text. So the default for input is type text. If you don't specify the type, it will always assume that you're doing type text. Okay, so input type text, usually we give it a name and we also give it an ID. So you should like giving it a name and an ID. So as good practice, I usually have the name and the ID appearing or looking the same, even though that's not a requirement, but it still works out. So every time you're defining an input, it's good to give it a name so that when you post this form, then it will go with the name. So for example, if I was to submit this form, then you'd see it will send this name as whatever is inside here or something of the sort. So either username, then it will put the contents, it will put the content over here. We're going to see how submit works. So that is one of the types of input that we can have, input of type text. Now the other type of input we can have is something like a password. So what I can do here, I can put a break just to create visual space between the two components. Then I'll put another label here and I'll say this is for password. Then I'll put my label as password like that. Now you can say I have password down there. So I need to put an input for password. So input, I'll put the type of password, which means that I don't want the contents to be visible. So as the user is typing the content, I don't want them to be visible. Then I'll give it an ID of password. And I'll give it a name of also password. Now what will happen here is that you realize that when I come to here and I type my name, maybe say Richard, then when it comes to typing my password as maybe say Akelo, you can see now I'm not able to see whatever I'm typing. That's what this input type password means. So it means that I am not able to see what the user is actually typing on this field. Are you together up to that point? Okay. Then we have other inputs. So I could ask somebody for maybe something like what is their favorite color? Okay. So I can say here label for theme color. So theme color. So for color, we have a color wheel or color picker. So I can have an input of type color. Then I give it an ID of theme color and a name of theme color. So you can see here what happens is if I ask somebody for the favorite color, I just need to pick a color from here. So I can pick anything to do with green. Then I can go to a different shade of green. So I can pick there. Then I pick a different shade of green. I can pick any shade of green that I want, something of that sort. Or I can change it to hexadecimal if I wanted hexadecimal like that, because sometimes it's good to work with hex. So as you can see, when it comes to color, there's an input for color. All right. Also, I might want to ask somebody for their date of birth. So for date of birth, I can put another break here and I simply put label for DOB. I like using abbreviation because that's too long. Date of birth, something like that. Then when it comes to date of birth, I'll come here and put an input. I'll change the type to be date if I want to use date in place. So I'll give it an ID of DOB and I'll give it a name of DOB. Now what happens here is you realize that when I say date of birth and I click this, you can see that it gives me a calendar. So I can pick a year from here, backwards or forth, something like that. So that is also another type of input that we can work with as far as forms are concerned. The other type of input that you can work with is the file input. So for example, you can ask somebody to upload their CV. So I can put a break here and ask somebody, so CV upload. So upload CV. Then what I'll do here is I'll put an input of type file. Then I'll give it an ID of CV upload. Then I'll give it a name of CV upload. So what will happen here is that now, when I say upload CV, you can see when I click on this, it will ask me to select a file, something like that. So then that file becomes an uploaded document as far as my user, my form is concerned. So you can also use that. Now, with this one, you can also be able to apply what kind of files it can accept. So you might want to accept only PDF or JPEG. So again, you can't be able to provide that. Now, you don't need to remember the exact syntax. So just come to Google here and simply say HTML input accept file types, maybe say JPEG and PDF. So it will just give you the implementation over here. This is what you need to put and accept. So under accept, just put this. It will allow you to be able to input or to accept only JPEG files, which are images, and PDF files. So if I come back here and I say accept, you'll probably see it has eliminated all the files that are not PDF. These ones are only PDF and images. So only PDF and images are available here. So that's very, very important if you wanted to be able to restrict the kind of files that you would like to upload. So that is the input type file. Okay. Now we can also have an input of type range. So maybe I can ask somebody, what is your budget? Let me say we are talking about a system where we're asking people to be able to choose. Maybe they're looking for a house, and maybe they want a house that is ranging between so much and so much. We can give an input of type range where we specify the maximum and the minimum, where now they can be able to select that value. So let's do that and see. Label here, uh, uh, rent range. So rent range like that. Then here what I'll do is I'll put an input of type range. Then I'll give it an ID of rent range. So rent range. At the moment it doesn't have any values, so I can say minimum as a property. I want it to be maybe say 10,000, and maximum is going to be 1 million, or maybe say 100,000. So you can see the minimum here is 10,000. The maximum here is 100,000. So you can actually put a break here. Then you can minimum on this side, then maximum on the other side. So it means that they can pick between that range and that particular range. So that is how the range type works. Okay. Now there's also another type of input called radio buttons. Radio buttons. Now, for example, let's say we're talking about gender, and I want to ask you, what's your gender? So it's either male or female, either of those two values. So what I'll do here, I'll put a label for, I'll say gender, and I'll put here gender. Then inside gender, now I'm going to put some input. These ones are going to be radio. Then I'll have the value here for male. The name here will be gender. This is okay. Let me just put here male, the way I've been putting them before, so that I explain the difference. Then I have another input of type radio. Still, this one is going to be female, and the name is going to be female, like that. So you can see, well, I have here male, the label there, and female, the label here. So I have gender. Well, I can put here a break. so that it appears on a new line like that. So I have gender male or female. Now the only problem with this arrangement is that I can select both male and female, as you can see, which is wrong. So I'm supposed to pick either male or female, not both of them. And this is happening because I've given them the same name. I've not given them the same name. So if I gave them the same name and say this one is gender, as I listed here, and this one is also gender. So if the names are the same, then you'll see that I'm only able to pick one at a time. So that's something that you need to be very careful about. When you have input of type radio, then they must have the same name. That's the only scenario where I give them the same names. That's the only scenario where I give them the same names when it comes to inputs of type radio. So radio means this selection, which means they are mutually exclusive. I can only pick one at a given time. I cannot use all of them. So that is input of type of type of type radio. Then you also have some scenarios where we want somebody to be able to select more than one option. So we're giving you multiple options, but we want you to select more than one option. You can pick 1, 2, 3, all of them or none. Okay. By the way, when it comes to gender, we must specify that you pick one. So what we do, we can put the value here is, I think, true. Actually, we'll say checked. You can add a property checked so that that one becomes selected by default. So at least one must be selected by default so that user must pick either of them. Remember, if I don't put this checked property, it means that none of them will be selected. But if I put the check property, it means that the one that I've said is checked will be selected by default. That's very, very important. Now, I was coming to a scenario where in this scenario, the choices are mutually exclusive. In some scenarios, we have choices that are, you can select more than one option. For example, I can ask you, how would you like us to contact you? And I can give you very many options for contacting you. So in this particular case, we can use what we call a checkbox. So I'll put a break here. And then I'll put a label for maybe say your hobbies or your interests. Your interests. So I'll put here your interests. So when it comes to your interests, you can have more than one interest. So what I'll do for the interest, I'll put an input of type checkbox. I'll give it an ID. Let's say this is swimming. So this will be swimming. Then I can have another option. This here will be swimming. Then I can have another option here. Sorry. So you can see automatically it has become a checkbox there. There's swimming. There's reading. There's programming. There's programming. Programming. Like that. So you can see now I have options here. I have swimming, I have reading, and I have programming. So I can tick any or all of them as appropriate. So that is what checkboxes do. When I want to give you an option where you can select more than one option, then that way it means that they're not mutually exclusive and you can pick any, none, or all of them. Somebody speaking? So yeah, so this is input of type checkbox. We have other inputs. Just hold on a second. So we also have input of type number. So for example, if I wanted to give you or ask you to be able to provide for me your telephone number here, I'll simply say here label for telephone, even though there's an input for telephone itself, so that it can be able to check the telephone number itself. But let me use number. But you have an input of type tel like that for telephone number. But I'll use number. So this one maybe say mobile number. Whenever you want to capture a number where users cannot be able to type anything that's not a number, then you use input of type number, so telephone. So here I can put input of type number. The ID is telephone or mobile number. So mobile number. So what will happen here is if I come here, I can't type my name like Richard, but I can type my number, something of that sort. So whenever you want to capture something like a number, then use an input of type number. Then you also have hidden. Now hidden is very important because sometimes we want to not show some things on the screen, but we want to be able to capture that data. We want to be able to capture that data. So what you do is I can put here the input of type hidden. You don't need to be able to have a label to it. So input of type hidden like that. Then I can give it a name, maybe say something like registration number. It's not going to be shown, but it's going to have a value. Then I can give say a value of 0. Now, if you look at my screen, you'll see nothing has changed, but actually the input is there. So if I change this input to text, you can see actually it is there with a value of 0. When I say it is hidden, then it means it's not going to show on the user interface, but it's actually going to be available for us to be able to use to capture some data that we might not want to display to the end user, something like an ID or a status or something of the sort. That's very, very important for us to understand. The other type of input we have is time. So I might want to ask you, what's the most appropriate time you'd like to visit to have a house tour? So label house tour time. So here I can say house tour time. I'm assuming that you are going to be able to ask somebody. This is a system that is somebody is using for booking a house. So you want to be able to ask them what time would be appropriate for doing the house tour. So I'll simply say something like input of type time. Then I'll give it an ID of house tour time. Then this will be house tour time, like that. So you can see with this one, now when I click on this, I can be able to pick the time that I want. So I want to do 12:30. So I can do 12:30 AM or PM, something like that. So when it comes to capturing time, it makes it very, very easy for me to be able to capture the time. Then, of course, there are two more that are left that are commonly, the ones that are commonly used. That's the break. So we have submit and reset. Submit and reset will allow us to be able to send over these forms for processing. So we can have another input of type submit. Then we give it something like save. Then the value will be submit. Value is what is written on the file on this button, which is submit. Then we also have another input of type reset. So this one clear form. Then the value I'll say clear form, or you can just say reset. So while I can put another break here so that they are separated. So clear form, if I had typed something like this and put some values here and picked a color here and put a date here and chosen a file here like that, and change this value and change this and put this and put this and put this time like that. When I clear, you can see it automatically resets everything. That's why it's called input type reset. Now, we remember when we were getting started, I talked about the form having two methods. One of the methods was the default, which is get. One of the method was get. So I want you to observe what happens. So I've not given it an action. Let me give it an action to itself. So let me say this form sends data to itself. So it sends to forms.html. This is where it sends this data to. Now I want you to observe this URL because I've put the default here. As you have seen, the default here is get, which means the data that I put on this form will be sent as part of the URL up here. So that's what get gives you. So what I'll do here is I'll just put some values, put some color, put some date, random, choose some random file. Female, I'll put this too. I'll probably put my telephone number, and then I can put some time. So you can see, once I submit, you can see that data is sent as part of the URL up here. So everything I have put is actually sent over as part of the URL up here. So sometimes it works if your form does not have a lot of data, or if it does not have what we call sensitive data like passwords or things like that. Okay, so that is get. Now if I make it post like that, what will happen is I'll come to inspect here and I'll come to network here. I'll expand this one a bit. I want you to observe what happens on the network here because I've put it as post. So for post, I'll put that, I'll pick my color like that. I'll choose my file. I'll pick my date of birth. Something like that. I'll pick my gender. I'll pick my interests. I'll pick my telephone number. And of course, I'll pick the appropriate time, which is 12:30 p.m. So when I submit, you have realized form data here has been sent over, and the form that has been sent over, you can now see the details. Registration number is that, admission. So you can see the data is not part of the URL, but it has actually been sent as payload. Okay, so you can see I have this data over here. I have mobile number, I have house tour time, I have the CV upload, which is this document, and so forth and so forth. So when you're dealing with sensitive data like passwords and you are uploading files or things like that, then it's very, very important for you to use the post rather than the get. Okay, so this is how we use forms to send over data. Now, the other things that we can use, they are not part of the input type, but rather they are controls on their own. And one of them is actually select. One of them is actually something called select. So you can see, for example, I can ask you something like, which county do you come from? So when it comes to which county do you come from, I can list all the 47 counties in Kenya. But you can see, if I was to use something like a radio button for that, I will have 47 different radio buttons. That is not very appropriate. So a select radio button will be able to suffice for that. So let's see how you can be able to use the select drop down for you to be able to add county. So I can simply put here label residence county. So I'll put here county, and I can even put the label there as residence county. So for resident county, I'll put a select. I'll give it an ID of residence county. I'll give it a name of residence county. Residence county, like that. Then after that, now when it comes to the select input, the select control, unlike the input, we have options down here. So I put an option. Then the option has two parameters. It has a value and a text. As you can see down here, there's the value and there's the text that is associated with that value. So I'll put the value here is maybe say Nairobi, or we can use the codes 047 for Nairobi. I can put Mombasa, maybe 001 for Mombasa. Then I can put Kilifi, 002 for Kilifi. Then I can put another option, 003 for Kwale, put 004 for Tana River, and so on and so on. So you can see when it comes to county, now I have a drop-down list here, which now I can just be able to select data from. So I don't need to have radio buttons, because now this, if I was to put all the 47, this would be too long. But even if I was to put all the 47 here, I just click on this drop-down and I see a drop-down of 47 entries, from which I pick the one that I want and I am good to go. So that is how the select works. So you have the select, you have the name and the ID. Then you have options, which means the items you want to appear as options as far as the select drop down is concerned. Now, besides select, we also have another control called text area. So text area is when we want to type in a lot of text. Maybe I'm asking somebody, tell us more about yourself. I mean, or maybe tell us what kind of a house are you looking for? Describe the kind of house you're looking for. They can say, I want a 3-bedroom, I want an on compound, I want something that has 3 parking lots, and it has a swimming pool and all. So there's a lot of stories that they can give you based on what they want. Now, based on that information, then we can pick that data and do processing on our side. So in scenarios where you want somebody to type more than one thing, you can't use text. So as you can see here, or rather I can put it down here. I can put here input of type text, give it an ID of about you. So about you. So about you here, okay, I need to put a label. About you. And I give it a text here of about you. So here I'm talking about you, and probably maybe I can put a break here. We're going to format with CSS later on, don't worry. So when I have about you, you can see when I type a lot of things here, this one can only be one line. If I press enter, it just keeps on processing the file. So I can't press enter so that now I go to a new line. So text will not be able to work out. So what we do, instead of input, we simply use what we call text area. Now the problem with text area, it must have a corresponding, it doesn't have a type. A text area is just a text area like that. And then you close the text area. So just like you can see, when it comes to select, we had a close select. When it comes to text area, we have close text area. For the other inputs, you can see they are blank. There's no corresponding close input. So that's the difference between these components. So when I say text area, like that, so you can see now I have about you, and I can say, I love programming. I also love swimming. I am a member of First Aid Club. And I can go on and on. I can even make this one bigger so that I can be able to type more. So that's why it's a control on its own called text area. Okay, so it allows you to be able to type as much as possible. Now, the other thing that you might want to have is on the text area, you can define how many rows and columns you want. So maybe say I want, maybe say 5 rows. So you can see it as 5 rows right now. If I say I want 7 rows, you can see it has grown to 7 rows. So I have row number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7. Then depending on the number of columns, you can also specify here. Sorry. You can also specify here, because when you say, maybe say I want, maybe say 30 columns. So I want 30 texts across. So you can see it has grown 30 texts across. So that way, if I try to type the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. So you can see this one by default, it was 30 text long. If I make it longer, something like 50, it will become wider. And of course, my text will just be able to fit on one line. So depending on how you want to design your user interface, when it comes to the text area, you can choose how many rows and columns you'd like to have. Now, when it comes to the input, there's one thing that I forgot when it comes to input. When it comes to input fields, you also have the option of specifying some placeholder, a text that's going to appear at the back here. So for example, I can give you an option. I'll say here, placeholder. Then I'll say something like e.g. admin. So you see e.g. admin appears on the background over here. So if I start typing, it disappears. If I don't type anything, it appears over there, something of that sort. Telephone number, I can put here and come and say telephone number. It should be input type number. It's here. So I can come here and put a placeholder. And I'll simply say something like so something like plus 254, like that. So somebody knows that it has to start with 254, then followed by some certain characters going in that direction, and so forth and so forth. So these are very important things when you're designing a user interface, so that you can be able to guide the user on exactly what kind of data you expect them to input, in what format, if there's any format to be followed, or that kind of a thing. The other thing that's very important is sometimes, as you can see here, this one is trying to remember the things that we had done in the past. If you don't want it to remember the things that you had done in the past, what you simply do is you come to the input, then you can add another property called autocomplete. Then you set it to false. When I set that autocomplete to false, you see when I come now, when I autocomplete, is it autocomplete or yeah, it should be, it's autocomplete false. Is it autocomplete false, or is it yeah, I think it's autocomplete false. Is it false or off? It's off, not false. It's off, not off. Sorry. Autocomplete off. So when you don't want it to remember things that you've typed in the past, you say autocomplete off, not false. Off, off, off. So now that way, you can see now it does not try to remember the things that I had typed before. I'll simply need to input the things that I want to input here, and it will not be able to remember that. That's also a very important aspect when it comes to input controls. Okay, so that is a lot to take in, and I would really want you to go through this and try to understand how everything works out, because moving forward, we're going to be basically be focusing on creating these inputs and now seeing how we can be able to use this input to be able to capture data. Of course, together with the ones that we have done before, where we are saying you can use images, you can use paragraphs, you can use list items, you can use anchor elements, and so forth and so forth. So now when you combine them together with the forms, now we can be able to create a comprehensive, complete user interface for our web-based application or our website. But of importance is to understand what types of inputs are there, how forms can be submitted, either using get or post. Get is the default, or post. the kind of inputs that were there. We have text, we have password, we have color, we have date and time, we have telephone, we have range, we have radio buttons, we have checkboxes, we have reset, we have submit, and so forth and so forth. Then we also have the element of select with option, and then you also have the issue of text area. So if you combine all those things together, based on what I've said, you should be able to create a very useful form that will now allow your users to be able to capture that data effectively. So I will give you a task to do based on what we have learned. I want to see how you are going to accomplish that, so that now when we start formatting this file, because the next thing that we're going to do is to start using CSS. And I want to show us exactly how to use CSS to format these forms to make them look beautiful, so that now moving forward, we know how we can be able to style our our pages, make them look something close to what professionals do without breaking a sweat. But of importance is knowing what you can be able to use to capture what data and place it in what way. So for your task, I would like you to create a registration form for the Technical University of Kenya. Create a registration form. You are We have advertised for courses. I want you to be able to create for me a form that a user can be able to capture their details, so that now we can process those details. I will leave the creativity for you, where you want to use images, where you want to use paragraph, where you want to use list items, where you want to use forms, where you want to use anchor elements, and so forth and so forth. You create that form and make it available before the next class. So I will just type it here. That's going to be our assignment. Create an admission form for TUK. You decide what kind of data you want to capture over there, then create your form based on that. Is that clear? I can make this file available for you just in case you need to refer to what I have been doing or anything like that. In case there's any question, you can reach me out on WhatsApp. I'll be able to assist where you get stuck. Is that okay? I'll also share the video with your class rep, so she'll be able to share it with you just in case you need to review something from there. The only thing I'm going to request you is to make sure that you've understood exactly how the form composition is made up. What is the form? How do you make up the form composition? And of course, what do you use to capture what kind of data? It's very important for us to be able to understand those concepts, so that now when you're creating a user interface, we know what controls we are able to use with the user. All right. Any question up to that point? I'll now take questions or comments. You can raise your hand, you can unmute your mic, or you can type in the message in the chat area. So I'll give you a minute or so to be able to ask for those questions. So there's no question? Okay, if there's no question, then I think I'll stop at that. You can use the remaining time to perform the task that I've given and share the assignment after this class. That's what I want you to be able to do. I want to see what you come up with and how you've understood it. So you can just go through the material, sharing both the page and the video with the class rep. Just go through it and make sure that you come with your UI before the end of this class. And by the way, whenever you send your assignment, I mark them and I grade you. So if by the time we're done with this course, you've not done any, rest be assured that at least 15 marks out of 30 you're not going to be able to get, because that is going to be this is what we call classwork, and classwork is measured based on the workshops that we do. So if you don't do a workshop, I don't give you anything. Just know about that, okay? So in that case, since there's no question, I think I'll stop at that. Then I'll share this. In case of anything, just try to reach out to me where possible. Okay? Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.